Well, hello and welcome again to Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Today I shall be making over a Matchbox number 54B, the S&S Cadillac Ambulance. These were first produced in 1965. The S&S stands for Sayers and Scoville, which was the company that produced the real vehicles. One of these ambulances featured in the movie Ghostbusters as Ecto 1. So this is what I've got to work with today. It's quite scruffy and hasn't been well maintained. Whoever had it before me as a child has painted it with white emulsion or something similar. Oh, the wheel just fell off. There was one wheel missing when I got it. Luckily for me, the interior is clean and there doesn't seem to be any paint in there. So I shall just take the body off and give it a closer inspection. As is normal, I shall drill the head of the rivet off to remove the base. I struggle to get the base off here because I inadvertently clamped the body too tightly onto the base, and took me a little while to work it out, but eventually I woke up and took it out the vise and the thing fell apart. There's a few little bits and bobs to this. There's the base, the interior, which is a bit grubby. It looks like this has had a few trauma cases in here over the years. Now I've got to remove this beautiful blue tinted windscreen assembly. And to do that I've got to drill out the rivet in the roof, but rather than drill through the roof I'm using this modified shallow cut drill that I made, and I've marked it with some blue heat shrink so I know that that's the one. So I shall do that now. Now it sounds pretty simple, but because this was painted with so much paint, the windscreen has actually been glued to the body with the paint, and I am actually struggling to get it apart. So I use a variety of tools like blades, screwdrivers, and toothpicks, and I actually think I'm winning here because the whole thing starts to move, but I was lulled into a sense of success momentarily because that's as far as I got. The front end is just rock solid. Here I am using a dental tool, just trying to tuck it in around the edges and loosen this thing up. And it's a real struggle, and I spent quite a while at getting this out. Eventually I grabbed it with some pliers at the back and give it a bit of a tug. I was terrified I was going to smash it or break it, but with a bit of a wiggle, eventually it came free. And whew, I'm glad that's over. That's probably the hardest bit of this restoration done. Also I thought, because it's got a red light on the roof, it's actually got 3 red lights on the roof, and those wouldn't come out either. And once again they were stuck with paint, but not only with the white paint, but also the red paint that they'd been painted with. Basically again glued them to the body. So I cheated there. I fast forwarded and didn't actually show you how long it took, but it took a hell of a long time to get that off also. Now, to remove the paint from this plastic component without damaging the plastic, I'm going to use some brake fluid. This will only attack the paint and leave the plastic unharmed. Whilst that part is soaking, I'm going to paint strip the body and the base. After applying the polystripper gel, the paint blisters and bubbles almost immediately. Now, to my surprise, instead of the paint just stripping off and revealing the metal, all it did was strip off and reveal the original paint underneath, which was virtually untouched by the paint stripper. So I'm going to have to do that again. The base wasn't such an issue, that came clean quite quickly. Now, because I've revealed the original colour, I thought I would take the opportunity to try and colour match the paint that I'm going to use to respray it. So, having the original paint at hand, I used this colour guide that I've made out of multiple colour cards that I've picked up from hardware stores over the years, and I deduced that that was the colour I needed. The colour is named Love Note. So I'm going to mix it up with Mr. Hobby Paints. The white is too white, and this type of white, number 316, is too dull. So I'm going to blend the two together, try and come up with an exact match, and I'm going to thin it with some airbrush thinners. This is always a bit time consuming, and seriously I think I waste more paint than I actually use. And of course the paint is one of the major expenses of this hobby. So almost daily I'm down the hobby shop buying up more paint. If you want to get the job done, then you have no option but to buy the paint, mix it up and use it. And there's always going to be some wastage. So using a little cotton bud there, I'm just going to dab on my first attempt at a match. And it looks close, but I actually thought it was a little bit too light. So I add a little bit more of the darker off-white and go again, this time on the roof. And I actually think it's quite good. So I'm happy with that. So I go on and mix up a batch. And then I cap the shot glass with another shot glass and some sellotape to keep the paint fresh for when I need it. I'm really struggling to get this original paint off. For the first time ever, my paint stripper has failed miserably. So I've nipped out of the shed and I've got this Makita heat gun that I've had kicking around for years. And I thought I'd give that a shot just as something different. And initially I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, oh, this is beautiful, look at that. The paint's all gone soft and bubbly. I'll use a little wire brush because I can't hold this thing now because it's red hot. And initially it comes off, but then I think it has time to cool and it goes all hard again. So I go back to the paint stripper, only this time I use a tip from one of my subscribers. I put it in a Ziploc sandwich bag so the fumes, apparently the fumes have a lot to do with it. So that traps the fumes in and voila! It actually worked this time round, and it came off quite easily in the end. There's always little bits left, so this very kind gentleman from Florida sent me a whole set of dental picks. He's actually a dentist, and I guess he's used these and maybe replaces them from time to time. And he sent me them, and I thought it was very generous of him. And they have come in so helpful. Just perfect for getting all these tiny little scraps of paint off. Even right in the grill here, which is extremely fussy. I want to try and preserve as much detail as I can, so it's important to try and get all this off. And this is how it turned out. There's the back. I had to gouge the paint out of those rear tail lights, but now I'm going to paint it, but I'll just show you these. These are some flicker-free LED lights I bought. They're battery powered, not the best, but what I've done is I've covered the lens with some thick sellotape, and these are going in my spray booth, and then in the future if I get paint on them, or they start to go a bit duller because the paint builds up, I can just peel the tape off and they will be like new again. So once again I'm using that fine surface primer from Tamiya. That way all those details in the casting are preserved. In my early days I used to just use anything I had in the shed, and there's really quite a difference in the end product. So here's the base, and here it is now undercoated. Now to get this interior clean, I thought I would try this, is that Bevel's? I'm not too sure what brand that is. But it's a jewellery cleaner that my wife Julie got for Christmas, so I thought I'd give it another shot. So I'm using some very hot, if not boiling water in there. I'm thinking the hotter the better. And I switch it on to its maximum speed. And I leave it for about half an hour. Next I am struggling with this red light assembly, or this red light moulding from the roof. I'm struggling to get all these fiddly bits of paint off. and I get it looking pretty good. It's a bit scuffed up now though, because I've used emery paper and the like. I'm going to try and rejuvenate it using this self-shining floor polish. What you do is just dip it in, shake off the excess, sit it on a little bit of kitchen towel, and then place a little cover over it to keep the dust off. And hopefully when it dries it will look real high gloss again. So I get this out, and although it's clean, because of the temperature of the water I used, it has warped and is now unusable. So lesson learned, don't use boiling water. So I had to grab another one I had from a scrap vehicle, and I've chucked that in now with cooler water, and that's going to be clean, and I'm going to use that one instead. So here's my little pot of paint I made. It's still runny because I taped it up. And this is my new spray booth. It's homemade, but should do the job. Here I've got a bit of a blockage in the airbrush, so I just loosen off the needle, and using some pliers I have to pull it out and force it backwards and forwards to clear the blockage, and yep, away we go again, which is good. And I park it there in my little 3D printed airbrush stand. Now it's time to clean these wheels. So I use my little wheel rig, which is a block of wood with a nail in it. I sit the wheel over it, and then just using some brake fluid, I've found that it's really effective at getting paint off of plastic parts, but it doesn't actually damage the plastic. Now you'll have to excuse me here, I'm rehydrating. It's another 35-degree day in Melbourne, and in my hobby room here it's probably like 40 degrees, so I've got this raging thirst as I'm going. But I apply the brake fluid and then use a toothbrush. I clean the plastic parts and the paint comes off, and the plastic parts look like new again, which is fantastic. So I just keep going, one at a time, until I've done them all. There's another one done, lovely job. Right, now all the wheels are done. I've cleaned up the axles, and I'm going to put the wheels back on the chassis, or the base. And a lot of people have asked me, how can they do it if they don't have a drill press? Because I normally use a drill press. Well, I'm going to show you now how to use a ball peen hammer. That's these hammers with a ball on the end. And basically you assemble the axle and wheels, and then you just gently tap, 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 tap with the ball peen hammer and peen the end over like that. And it's actually quite quick, and it's not too difficult at all, and it's not a bad finish. You just have to remember to have the end of the axle that you're not hitting has to be pressed up hard against something, like the jaws of this vise, for example. And it rolls quite freely. So not a bad option. Now, using this paint marker, as I always do, I'm just going to highlight the grille and headlights. I'm only doing that because on the original models that is all that was done, so I resist the temptation to do the bumper bar and the number plate and the rear tail lights, etc. I just try to keep these original. I find the ink from the paint pen is extremely good for this job because it's very light and runs into all the nooks and crevices and doesn't obscure any details. So I've cleaned the windscreen using some brake fluid and got all the paint off that, and now I'm just giving it a high gloss finish with the floor shine again. And whilst I'm here, I'm giving the red beacons on the roof a second dunking. The more the merrier. And again, put the dust cover over. And so far I'm liking the way this is going. Now I'm doing things in a slightly different order today. I'm going to put the decals on before I've assembled the model. I normally do it last, but because those bits are drying with the floor shine on, I thought I'd go ahead and put the decals on whilst I'm waiting. So these are 5mm sized little red crosses that I printed off on my computer on some clear backed decal paper, and I just cut them out to size. Sprayed a top coat of Mr. Hobby Clear over the top. That way the ink doesn't run when you immerse them in water. Just gently push them into position. Can you see those marks on the door? Those are there as a guide for in the factory where the people used to, on the assembly line, used to apply the decals, and it gave them a quick reference as to where the decal should go, roughly. So anywhere between those two lines, I guess, was acceptable. Now I'm just sealing the edges with some Mr. Hobby softener, I think it's called, and it's for setting decals on the model. A lot of people have recommended that I do this, and I haven't been doing it as a general rule, but I figured they can't all be wrong, so I'm going to make it part of my standard practice from now on. So that looks pretty good. I'll just do the other one, and then we're probably going to be on to the assembly. So here's all the parts after they're dried and cleaned and polished, and now I'm going to put it all back together, which is only a 5-minute job. First up, the little cleaned and paint-free red light section. Now today, for something different, I'm gluing in the windscreen, the blue tinted windows, with some silicone. Reason I'm doing this is twofold. I can't reform the rivet on the roof because there's no metal left. And two, I used to use araldite or epoxy resin, and a lot of people said I shouldn't do that because in the future, if someone wants to take this apart, they're going to have to smash the windscreen to get it off, which I think is quite, you know, makes sense, makes a lot of sense really, unlike me at this moment in time. So I just put the base in place, and here's the little colour match 2M screw going into the post that I tapped after I drilled the rivet out. I forgot to show that in this video, but I'm sure most of you have seen it before. And now let's have a look at the final reveal, because this is what it was like when I started. It was a rotten looking thing. You know, this is not playworthy or collectible. It needed a restoration, so I gave it my best shot. Got all the old paint off, cleaned the lights, cleaned the windscreen, fixed the wheels, new decals, painted the grille, and this is what it looks like now. So this Cadillac ambulance has been given a makeover. What was once only fit for the scrap heap has now been cleared by the health department as fully operational to transport patients to and from hospital and to respond to any medical emergency. This was the second Cadillac ambulance that I have done. Now, for the first time, both ambulances are showcased for your visual pleasure. For those of you that are interested, here is a picture of the first one I did. As you can see, the previous owner thought that it was a good idea to colour the ambulance blue with an indelible marker pen. Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Goodbye. What's wrong with this stupid focus? Won't focus. Where's Marty's Matchbox stripper when I need it? Bollocks to it. Look at that. It's like a banana.